r/antiwork. Buffer Summers says, WTF is this? Why do they use these types of pay rates? It looks sketchy as hell. I see it everywhere. Included photo. Adamingo2 says, I think they do this so their listing comes up in multiple filters on searches. Scummy. Hiloy Hidk says, I saw a job ad on Indeed that had remote work in the description just so it'll pop up in tags, but they wanted you in office. Erichie says, report it. Foldingler D says, some states like Colorado have made it illegal to post a job without a salary range. Tubjunkie says, as someone in Colorado, I appreciate the sentiment, but it's fairly useless. Employers looking for help in good faith already gave upfront and sensible ranges. Competitive rate is honestly more informative than, frick, in $40-120k. There needs to be an addition that states the rates are based off actual rates that they're currently paying people in those positions or have paid in the last X years, as well as something like an average or median. Supplichanguhai1 says, report this to the appropriate government oversight board. They will fine the company. The law says it must be a good faith pay range. They can't put $1 to $2 million a year. Mythrash Christ says, in this case, since it's sales, it's probably commission potential. Upset Form 5258 says, I work a commission-based sales job and this is how my job was listed. It's also pretty accurate. Some of my coworkers make six figures and some make $45-50k a year and we all have the exact same job title and roles. Stejison says, you can progress up to 120k over 25 years if you work hard. Tresla3 says, while I appreciate the recent laws to show a salary range, I very much want additional laws preventing this type of crap. r/antiwork. Thidrumminggape says, I'm attending an interview today for a position I have no intention of accepting. I'm currently an operations manager for a global corporation and have recently been searching for a new role. I applied for a site manager position for a medical supply company I felt I was overqualified for, but saw no indication on what the salary was in the advertisement and figured what the hell, I'll ask during the phone screening if they contact me. Within 10 minutes after clicking the apply button I received an email from the district manager. I'm conducting interviews on Friday at my town location, can we meet at 1 p.m. for an interview? An immediate red flag went up for me. Why was there no phone screening? Why such an informal reply? I immediately thought to myself that this approach is because they are playing the law of averages in hopes to secure someone with leadership ability that is desperate enough to accept such a difficult role. I suspected a meat grinder type of work environment where site managers are exploited and worked to the bone while being driven to meet unrealistic KPIs until they burn out and quit. I'm likely to be walking into a place where this manager is churning through interviews all day in hopes to find someone gullible enough to accept this position. I did a bit of research on the company, checked out reviews and salary history on Indeed. I discovered a plethora of negative reviews from people that held this role. I'm talking hundreds of negative reviews. My initial assumption appeared to be correct. Mostly the reviews focused on being severely overworked, underpaid, always on call, and sometimes working 70 hours a week, weekends, holidays, etc. I also discovered that this role pays around $65k a year, less than half of what I make now. I drafted up an email declining the interview, citing the negative reviews and the salary range discovered on the Indeed company page, but had a sudden change of heart. I decided to accept the interview, since I'm off today and the location is 5 minutes from my house. My plan is to nail this interview, and when it is time for me to ask questions, to put the interviewer on the spot for the negative reviews, low pay and high turnover. I'm not easily intimidated, so I'm fairly certain I can dominate this interview once I share my experience, accomplishments, and gain her interest. I'm not opposed to turning this interview into an uncomfortable confrontational nightmare if I get any sense of bullshit or attempts to dodge my questions. I'll report back with the result later today. The interview is at 1 p.m. Est. I live in a one-party state, so I may even record it. I'll also share the name of 6, if this turns out to be what I suspect. See you all later this afternoon. I understand that I could be completely wrong about my initial impression. If I am, I will be happy to admit that when I return to this post. Update: the interview lasted 14 minutes and 28 seconds. From walking in the door to walking out. About 4 minutes was spent waiting to meet the hiring manager. I have it recorded, but it's really not worth listening to. I was asked to explain why I was looking to leave my current position, and I answered. Pretty normal start. She then asked about my responsibilities and the number of people on my team. When I answered with 136 and 4 direct reporting managers with 1 supervisor under each of them, her eyebrows raised. She broke eye contact for a moment, while appearing to be a bit uncomfortable. She preambled a bit out of, and asked me what my salary expectations were. I flipped the question. I'm sure you are working with a budget for this position. What would that be? She appeared disappointed with the question for a quick second, broke eye contact again, and replied. This pays around $70K. I feigned disbelief, and took a long pause. That's about half of what I currently make. She immediately sat back in her chair and said, wow, I can do, at best $80K with additional bonus potential, but it would not bring you anywhere close to that amount. Look, I have to be honest with you. I should have known better when I reviewed your resume, but I'm having a tough time with getting applicants, so I interview everyone that applies. She looked dejected, and I felt a bit bad for her. I informed her that her trouble may have to do with the lack of transparency of the salary in the job posting as well as the large amount of negative reviews. I know, unfortunately I don't post the job ads, she said. She looked very disappointed, so I thanked her for her time, shook her hand, and walked myself out. She didn't leave her office. Sorry if everyone was expecting more drama out of this, but she became immediately submissive as soon as I was done talking about my current role and work history. The company. Bevagel says. You never know, he might be desperate enough to pay stupid money. Then you have to decide if the terrible working conditions are worth it. If, by some chance, you do take the job, you seem like the kind of person that would fight for your rights and kick up a stink if something is wrong, reporting to authorities, lawsuits etc. Could be lucrative, if not stressful. Curious to know how it goes. The Drumming Ape says. I'm definitely looking for better working conditions, rather than an insane amount of money. When I was younger I definitely didn't have the same opinion as I do now. Detroit's Going Towin says. That reminds me a little of a bad Saturday morning I had. I was running a small hardware store. I opened the day at 8 AM and 30 dudes roll in. I'm thinking, oh boy, how am I going to help all these people? It turns out an outside company set this store up as an interview site. The only problem was no interviewer showed up. I felt horrible for these guys. Someone put this job interview online, never told me or my company, and they no-showed these guys. Some drove over an hour to get here. I ran next store and bought 3 dozen donuts out of my own pocket for these dudes. I think I know who did it too. We had one extremely shady customer back then who probably had something come up and didn't give a single frick about screwing these guys over. If these guys aren't legit, mail their ass to the wall. Kiss Kismet says. This sounds like a good time to me. Let us know who it goes. I might want some pointers. Squiggy 1975 says, I gotta get the update. Is there a way on Reddit to get notified when an update has been posted from op, or at least save the convo to check back easily? Milksteak of course says, Attaboy, frick, I'm go get em. Kempo7 says, Remind 8 hours. Dididorg says, subscribe. Pip 122803 says, Remind 12 hours. Smokers Boiled Go says, Remind 8 hours. r/antiwork. Lawful in Neurotic says, rule of thumb, record every job interview. Words mean nothing, but having a record of a verbal agreement makes it enforceable. I record my interviews. Zoom type interviews you can use OBS or similar to record the exchange. Having a recording app running in your phone is great for in-person. Same is true of phone call interviews, where you can record the call over an app. I've been fortunate enough to not need to interview much, but the few times I did I always recorded the situation. This actually resulted in me catching an employer in a lie, which worked out in my favor. I interviewed for a position where I was quoted a starting pay of $25 hours. I accepted within the meeting, and when the time came to sign the documents, I received a contract for $23 hours. I reached out to the person who would have been my manager, and he denied profusely that he had ever made an offer of $25 hours. Honestly, it was scary how straight-faced he was about it. I told him he was mistaken, and I sent him the clip of our interview, where he specifically states the position is for $25 hours. This was over email, so I couldn't see what his reaction was, but the fact it took him a day to respond is evidence he wasn't pleased. This is important. Verbal agreements suck because there isn't a way to validate them if both parties disagree. Recording the exchanges you have with employers ensures there will never be any confusion over the terms of an agreement, and you will always have evidence to fall back on. I didn't hear from them for a day, and I eventually got an email from ours apologizing for the confusion, which included an updated contract with my agreed upon pay rate. Tidime says, people need to be careful with this advice. Some states/jurisdictions require the consent of both parties for recording conversations. You can ask at the beginning of the interview if it's okay if you record it. A no would be a red flag for me. GTS84 says, also keep in mind some places distinguish between recording an in-person conversation and recording a telephone or Zoom call. Because the laws were written before computer calls and before everyone carried a recording device in their pocket. Illinois, for example, has one-party consent for electronic communication and two-party for in-person. So you could record a Zoom interview, but not in person. Russell Guy says, your manager will be looking to retaliate after that. But Holalamo says, California is a two-party consent state, for example. Purple following 278 says, I had a head teacher who was a pathological liar. I went into many meetings with my recording app running on my phone. She could lie so easily she believed her own crap. Got me out of many awkward situations, and she was terrified when I left, apparently, as she didn't know what I was going to spill. I didn't, as she wasn't important enough to waste my time on. Jess3114 says, has anyone ever questioned you doing this? I know on Teams all parties can see that the meeting is being recorded. FCUC 12,345,678 says, so in an it will state, even if you have a recording, can't they just hire you then fire you for no reason? Jmlozen says, I would never work for a place where the first official interaction is lies and coercion. Not to mention the manager retaliation if you do get your way and take the job. This is an example of advice being smart in theory, but terrible in practice. Mudful and Befuddled says, Not great advice, at least in the US. First, as several people have noted, this is illegal in two-party consent states. Second, if an interviewer finds out you're recording them, it will likely cost you job offer, which is not to say it should, just that's what the reaction is gonna be. Third, the recording is in a lot of ways useless. Employment in the US is at will, and the law in general is ridiculously pro-employer. An employer can easily, and legally, offer you $25/hour, then before you start say just kidding, it's $17, even if the original offer was in writing. In your scenario above, I'm frankly surprised they didn't just withdraw the offer. That is going to be the reaction 90+% of the time when someone learns they were secretly recorded. Apparently you're a desirable enough hire that they didn't, and good on you, but you likely could have accomplished the same by saying you couldn't accept any offer under $25. I'm glad this worked out for you, just don't want to see others trying it and getting screwed over. California, Connecticut, Delaware, Florida, Illinois, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, Montana, Nevada, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, and Washington IML. That's all for this video. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe.